people in the 60s talked about Slack. Now you're probably thinking, okay, so has anyone talked about Slack since the 60s? Like of course they talked about Slack in the 60s. It was the 60s. Absolutely. But just like we have talked about all of those different ways that researchers described resiliency kind of over the years, we have been talking about it differently too. So, whether it's the finance people talking about R&D in, funding R&D in the cost structure, whether we're talking about, macroeconomic fiscal policy using benchmarking, which is essentially a Slack word because it's not about hitting a specific, definitely hitting a specific target. It's essentially about a best practice that you should aim for. Whether it's a private company talking about ballparking, which is another Slack-ish word because it's building in this margin of error. We are building in all of these different ideas and terms, the idea that not maximizing, that not being exact and about figuring in risk is not only just okay, but it's pretty much a necessity. So let's think about two modern-ish management scenarios. So who here, quick show of hands, has heard of just-in-time inventory? Yes, so just-in-time inventory means that the days of stockpiling things in warehouses was done. We would make it when it was ordered. It would conserve space. We wouldn't be paying for all of this warehouse space. And so we would save costs and then be able to and being able to save on storage costs and inventory management would equal more profit. The problem is, and I think the appearance of Amazon warehouses all over the United States has shown, is that really just in time can be very costly indeed because there isn't a lot of slack. So if you had an order with 0 days, or if you had 20 days without an order, and then all of a sudden you got an order for 200 widgets, then you weren't going to be able to be very responsive, and you were going to have to source whatever inputs went into your widgets. And that was going to cause potential stress for your suppliers. And so it minimized a particular cost, but at the expense of slack. And that lack of slack opened you up to risk from so many places in your supply chain. Compared to this kind of strategic positioning that Amazon now does in order to not make sure that you're going to get your product in 2 days, because Amazon Prime just isn't what it used to be pre-pandemic, but at least they're not having to make things from scratch, which I definitely appreciate. There is some slack in the system. They will get me whatever it is that I ordered from the warehouse in a reasonable amount of time. And I think that this can be compared to a system like agile management, which is based on a software production and development approach that is really focused on incremental change. So there's hyper communication. You're talking with individuals every day, and every day there's going to be a slight change, a slight adjustment, and so this kind of immediate contact and this kind of constant evolution, this learning environment, this allows for evolution, it allows for innovation, because you're okay not knowing exactly where you're going to end up on day 12 back on day 1. It's a part of the system, knowing that you're going to be meeting with someone every day, with your team every day. It's not like it's going to go way off the rails. The hyper communication allows you to be agile. And I think that is a lot closer to what we're talking about here in terms of Slack. So it's not like everyone is sitting there waiting for orders from, it's not that there's a bench. It just means that the small investment of time every day is allowing you the flexibility to not have these grand plans that would come with traditional project management. Um, Ironically, most of the time, like if you Google Slack right now, you won't get anything of the dozens of definitions that we've talked about. You'll get the messaging device. So fair warning. And so this did cause me to ask myself whether or not Slack, the app, actually encouraged Slack, the concept. And I think in one it does, because one of the most useful applications for Slack that I have seen in day-to-day business, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, is the back channel Slack. And so if you're on a call with a funder or a client, or whatever, then being able to communicate with other people on your team in real time while talking to the client can be both informative, or if it is an unpleasant call, a stress relief. And so it builds in this additional space into these kinds of this hyper productive hour where you're having a business meeting. Slack does actually introduce some slack into your work life by allowing you to build your personal network and improve employee morale by sending affirmative messages out to your team while this other unpleasant call may be happening. So that's a good thing. Slack is providing slack in a way. But I think where I'm headed with this is that we're getting more comfortable, I think, with the idea of Slack in a whole lot of different ways. But I think that we have two main problems in the nonprofit sector. One is that we are constantly compelled to justify our need for Slack. And this can be pressure to, not have an operating surplus during a year. It can be pressure from the board. It can be a guilt by withholding some amount of resources today so that we can spend the resource tomorrow. But also, I think, picking the right level of slack. So even when we get to the point where we accept the fact that we need that surplus and we need that reserve, picking the exact right level of slack can be very, very difficult. And so I kind of like this picture. So what we're looking for is the Goldilocks level of slack. And this is another word that Dennis and I had a lot of conversation about. And I like this particular picture, a depiction of Goldilocks, because we've moved beyond the breaking and entering stage of the relationship, and Goldilocks and the bear are getting along well, but it really is finding the right level of slack. So not too much, not too little, but what is the right level? And I think that a lot of those specific exact level details are going to be that's where the section specific modules that are coming up are going to be extremely informative. So getting into what is the right level of slack for my balance sheet. Is it okay for me to have a liability? That's definitely sign up for that module. But my goal today is that if you are in the place where you need to be justifying the fact that there should be some slack built into individuals responsible for the management, the funding, or the governance of your organization, that you have the tools to justify that today. And so that is what I'm planning for you to leave with today. So let's go from preparing for crisis to managing crisis. This is a screenshot from a 1972 movie called Hapkido, or when it was brought to the US was called Lady Kung Fu. And it is a really fabulous movie if you're into old martial arts movies. One, because they're just really, really good fight sequences, but two, it was really exceptional because it had a female protagonist. And you can see off to the right, she is about to enter an amazing display of prowess by handling a room full of an opposing school of martial artists. So why am I showing you this? Because in Hapkido, just like in many martial arts, the concept of space utilization is actually really key. So how you respond depends on the distance between yourself and any opponents, what their intentions are, what your intentions are, and etc. So, but it really is that the space itself is key, because how much space you have determines the responses that you are able to make and which one is the best fit for the situation. So the moves that she is about to engage in, if there were fewer people, if there were, people that were closer, that would definitely impact the choices that she had in terms of defending herself and surviving the situation. So in managing crisis, the key really is agility. So making sure that we have slack gives us the ability to position, to maneuver, and to respond. Will we be able to respond if we don't have an annual surplus, or if we don't have membership in a larger network? Of course, but we're not going to have the same amount of room to move, to maneuver, to respond, and to innovate. So it's all about having some degree of space in which we can actually respond to the organization using a number of different possibilities. So it allows us to not only continue to provide services through these kinds of crises, but as Stuart mentioned earlier, it also allows us to grow during non-crisis. So it will strengthen our organization, and it allows us to help those that we are serving, either because they are the people that we're targeting with our mission, or they're other organizations that are in the same network. They will also become stronger when we have the room to maneuver. It also, as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, it's key to helping us become learning organizations. So if we are always obsessed with keeping the lights on every day, then it can be difficult to instate a lot of best practices. That's one of the reasons that I like running service learning projects with my classes. So all of my classes, we always work with nonprofits in the community, especially with classes like strategic planning. And we'll work with very, very small organizations, because in my experience, the organizations that may be in the most need of a strategic plan are the ones that are so busy doing that they don't have the time to put together a strategic plan. And so being able to build in some slack, which in this case is me being able to bring a team of students that are gung-ho about learning strategic planning, that is giving them some breathing space so that they can continue doing what they're doing while we can also kind of bring in our own capacity building. So I want to be mindful of our time. I only have about 10 more minutes before we break. And so I'm going to, just looking at what we have left. Good, we'll look at stuff, it just won't be an in-depth conversation. So these are the upcoming modules where we're going to look at not only Slack, but what level of Slack is going to be the most appropriate, how to discover it. And we're actually going to make the first step toward that, at the end of today's session, I've put together a worksheet that is going to help us look at each one of these areas in our own organization. It can be, the one, a nonprofit that you're working for, or it can be one that you work with, that you volunteer for. Just use an organization of meaning. And I want to start to get you thinking about, okay, so in terms of human resources, this is where I feel that we currently are at. Our morale is high. Our pay is slightly below for-profits in the area, but pretty much on par with nonprofits. We don't have a very organized volunteer coordination, but we've sure got a lot of people that want to come out. And then so we'll start to assess, and then the worksheet will lead us through thinking about how to take where we are, analyze it for where we can build in slack, and then you should be able to take that to whichever modules you follow up with and build on that idea. So as a real quick illustration of a mini case study, because we'll be doing a case study later, is Hull House. So who here, just show of hands, has heard of Hull House? Okay, awesome. Fairly well known, founded in 1889. It began as a place for women to provide classes and training, and then social services to the neighborhood. In the 20th century, they moved from just providing services into advocacy, because they realized a lot of the problems that they were trying to address, such as a lack of education, poverty, had an advocacy and policy component to it. But then it was a renowned institution that then, to many people that were not on the inside, all of a sudden, one day, up and closed. And so there was a lot of kind of talk and introspection as to what exactly happened in Hull House. And so this, I thought, was a handy diagram that someone put together in looking at the Hull House closure situation. And I've circled the ones that involve finance, because normally when you ask someone, well, why did something close? So, they ran out of money. I'm like, oh, okay, that's, ran out of money. That's it. It's really, really never that simple. Resiliency is a multifaceted portfolio concept, and our responses should also be multifaceted portfolio responses. So if you came into today thinking that you were just going to be taking the HR module follow-up, and that was the only one you were interested in, man, I implore you, it's about having a portfolio of tools, because it rarely is just one thing that is a source of risk and vulnerability. And so looking at Hull House, yes, there was potential financial mismanagement, but there were a lot of other things going on there. So the drift away from the original mission, the communication issues that members of the staff and the board were having, the general lack of effective board governance, the death of the founder, all of these things. And the death of the founder, that can impact that core why. So all of these things kind of compounded, and did the doors close because there wasn't enough money? Yes, technically that's probably why the doors closed, because there wasn't enough money. But why wasn't there enough money? And it's because of a host of reasons, in addition to financial ones like over-reliance on government funding and inadequate fundraising. So if the board of Hull House had, really, really buckled down on one of these things, if, they had decided, well, we're going to focus on mission. They went through, they used my students for a strategic planning session. And we got really laser focused on mission. Would that have saved Hull House? We will never know, but my guess would be probably not. It probably would have taken a portfolio approach, looking at everything, looking at the system in order to be a resilient organization. So would it have helped? Yes. Would a mission focus have potentially leaked out into the other problem areas and helped them? Potentially. But the problems are multifaceted problems, and those multifaceted problems require multifaceted responses. So understanding the multifacetedness, this list in the middle are the list of all of the modules that you have the opportunity to sign up for and get kind of specifics on at later dates. But this is I can't overstate the importance of this portfolio approach. So knowing that resilience, slack, flexibility and agility, and then risk, which will be the next module offered. Understanding risk, these creep into your balance sheet, your income statement, your treatment of technology, your human resources. They permeate everywhere. And so it's important to think about them all. And so, as Dennis kind of said when we were kicking this all off, nonprofit management, and I've been teaching it for a few years now, we've been focused on efficient because that's what we're pushed to, and effective, which is important to us because we really want to move the needle for people, even though it can be really hard to measure. But we need to get beyond that. We need a change in paradigm, because efficiency is not determined, solely by input or output pricing. It needs good impact measures. And those impact measures need to be long-term and not just short-term. We need to be able to tell the board member that says, why aren't we spending the money on people today? We need to be confident in saying, because by having this reserve today, we are going to be better positioned to provide resources for people a year from now. We don't want to feed one person today at the cost of 20 people next year, same day. And we need to be comfortable with that kind of across time conversation, because it can be a hard one. And that even with impact and a timeless time horizon, it's still not going to be about efficiency. We're not about efficiency. We're not the for-profit sector. We are organizational creatures that are trying to, yes, Stuart?
So you just touched my my heartstrings here. So so this concept that what makes the nonprofit sector different, and pushback that's required to arguments that say things like, well, you're not working more like a business, or you're not as accountable as a business. I mean, I guess the more kinds of rationale like this, it's almost a principle, is this efficiency thing is not, it's not the same measure in the nonprofit sector as it is in business or government. And I can understand that. I can understand why. I just, I guess I'm starting to realize that this is really a central concept of what makes a nonprofit a nonprofit. The institution part of it, the durability part of it is as important as the performance, it seems. And I don't know who wrote that or if it's anywhere in the literature, but maybe that's my aha by listening to you. I'm not sure.
Well, and it's, Dennis, go ahead. Dennis, you're muted.
we can think of nonprofits that way, that we don't judge them solely by the quality of the service that we got yesterday or today, but by the fact that we have, reassurance and comfort that they're there. I mean, I don't go to the symphony every day, but I get satisfaction in the fact that it's there and it's going to be there, and that there's a hospital and important social agencies and universities and so forth. So I think that's part of it, but part of it is also interpreting. I mean, we're playing with a lot of words, but interpreting efficiency in the right way. That we're often focused on measures of very short-term efficiency. And what we're really interested in, as Elizabeth is explaining, is how efficient are we in really accomplishing our goals over the long term, which requires that you be there over the long term, you be viable as an institution over the long term, so that you can have that better long-term impact and achievement of the mission. So all of these things are kind of connected, I think.
I think so. And I think that we find ourselves in this hotly contested spot where but I'm pushing back pretty strongly against using efficiency as a measure of our worth. But I'm also still a firm believer that we need program evaluation in order to make sure that we are in fact being effective. So many times you'll find anti-efficiency people and anti-evaluation people are the same people. And I'm not. I do think that we need to be good stewards of the resources that we have. And that means that, we're not foundations. We're not just bringing in the money and then sitting on it so that we can use it 5 years from now. Like that, that's not what we do.
Right.
But finding the balance is really the key part, and being able to justify finding that balance between spending today to meet mission, but having enough slack to meet mission next year, unless we're planning to not be here next year. If we're planning to be around, then we need to resource the ability to be around. And finding that sweet spot is the key, and why I'm probably going to be attending the other sessions, because I'm really interested in seeing how other people teach this, because this is something that is, I think, always the where the rubber meets the road. I think is always the interesting spot, and I'm very comfortable defending why Slack is important, but the ideal spot for each organization, I think, can be very subsector specific. So I'm really interested in seeing what, especially in things that I don't know, that I'm not an expert in, like the technology. I'm really interested in finding how to find the technology Slack sweet spot for organizations, so that I can then pass that information on to those that I do capacity building for. This new orientation, and I know that I'm about 4 minutes over, so I'll wrap this up, will do a lot, I think, to move us past operational logistics, which are super important. I say this as a logistics type of person, but it's about more than the efficiency of the organization. We are organizations providing public goods like government with the organizational bodies of private companies like for-profits. That is always going to cause problems, but it will always encourage innovation, creativity, and is having listened to everyone's whys. That kind of difficulty is kind of what drew us here in the first place. So thinking about resiliency more often will help us do things like incorporate measurement systems, like we're going to be talking about red flags in one of the modules, or identifying new opportunities that come from crisis. Like our focus is on surviving crisis, but there is that positive element, that innovation, that opportunity for growth. These are things that a nonprofit resiliency management orientation, I think, are going to give us.